I know it's been a while. We kind of stopped posting to our YouTube video after we lost Raven. And we've just been kind of focusing on Rush, but within the last month or so, I am learning even more about nutrition. So we're kind of starting to research possibly modifying this PMR 80-10-10 ratio, this way of feeding that we have been feeding for like 5 years now. But there's a lot of research to be done, and we're still learning, and I feel like we are just kind of scratching the surface, but I wanted to share with everyone what I've found so far. So a quick little background story of how this all came about. We lost Raven. Rush was lonely, of course. We were all sad. We were all eating our feelings. We were feeding Rush treats to make him feel better. And everyone gained a little bit of weight. And Rush especially, not necessarily that he has a sensitive stomach, but because of all this treat supplementation and such, his poop was really weird. Sometimes it was perfect, sometimes it was too hard, sometimes it was too runny, and I just wasn't keeping good track of what we were feeding him. He was getting a lot of human food treats during the day, and then typically the way we make Rush's food is when we're prepping the Raw and Rush pre-made packs, he doesn't get a full pound per day, so I kind of just throw together 12 ounces. Like, I have a good idea of what the bone requirement is for that, but I just kind of take the leftovers after prepping everyone else's packs and I throw them in containers for Rush. They do have, the meat, the bone, and organ. They follow PMR, but they were kind of random. Some days had more bones, some days had less, and we really did believe in the whole balance over time. So recently, I wanted to come up with a way to track these things in his diet so that I could figure out what the sweet spot was. Like, what, as far as I thought, calcium and fiber, because we don't really add vegetables to our food, but I thought that I could come up with some kind of ratio and figure out, all right, this is the sweet spot for Rush to poop perfect and not be smearing all over the sidewalk. So I was trying to figure out a way or how to track this, and I came across a spreadsheet from a woman named Jenny. She is part of Raw, Fed, and Nerdy, and I'll link the spreadsheet below. And so I started to, input our meals and tried to determine what was the optimal calcium and fiber for Rush to be okay. And I joined the Facebook group, and this is where we get all the talk and all the opinions and all the new knowledge that PMR 80-10-10, super simple old school way, is not balanced. And I'm like a PMR purist. I'm like, wolves didn't have calculators and they didn't have supplements, and they weren't, or at least I don't think that dogs were fishing out oysters out of the ocean to meet their vitamin E and D3 requirements. But when it comes to feeding our dogs, we're always learning, right? And I'm always interested. I find this all very fascinating, and I want to learn as much as I can so that I can make the right decision. And going back to our roots, that's how this whole thing started, was that I was a PMR 80-10-10 feeder, and I still am. I haven't really changed anything with Rush's feeding style. I'm still doing the research. But I started this because a lot of people were so confused about how to make this PMR style diet, and it started with helping people. And then we kind of turned it into a side gig. So this is kind of the next step, right? Especially after we lost Raven, when we went through that funk, the next thing I started to ask myself after looking at this spreadsheet is, can we do better? And like I said, it's still a work in progress. So I'm trying to share what I've found. And all I've been able to do so far is kind of audit our beef pack recipe. Now, with this spreadsheet, there are 2 ways to balance a diet. There's AAFCO, and in order for a pet food to be sold in the United States as completely or nutritionally balanced, it has to meet this standard. This standard came from NRC. So NRC, I believe, came first. Again, I will link you to resources. You could research with me. I'm still learning, so some of these things might not be 100% true. This is about a month of me reading through articles. NRC came first. They're a bunch of scientists, and they came up with nutritional requirements for cats and dogs. Then AAFCO comes along, and these are primarily the pet food manufacturers, and they adopted some of these requirements that were established by NRC, but they wanted to kind of give it like a blanket coverall to be able to call it complete for like every dog, or sorry, puppies or adult dogs of every size, of every life stage, and kind of just come up with a formula that would work for all the dogs. NRC is much more specific, so it depends on, I believe, your weight and your energy levels and what life stage you're in, if you're like lactating or if you're a puppy. So NRC is very, very tailored, and it's very, very specific. Well, clearly, the pet food manufacturers, for the sake of manufacturing in bulk, needed to come up with something that was kind of a one-size-fits-all. So they modified NRC. With that being said, I used AAFCO, which is what the pet food manufacturers use, to audit our beef recipe, because every dog is different. And the reason that we shy away from dry food in the first place is because it's garbage. But at least AAFCO is a starting point to see, is it meeting the nutrient requirements, or am I doing equal or better than if I were still feeding kibble? So it's a place to start. And we have a lot of research to do as far as like how NRC works, and it's a lot more complicated. Like I said, it's much more specific for your dog, but we'll get there. But as far as what we've found with AAFCO, our beef packs aren't terribly off. So I put in our typical recipe, which is like a bone-in duck necks or duck wings, boneless beef, beef tripe, beef liver, and then kidney and sometimes spleen. And those packs were formulated doing PMR 80-10-10. These values, the percentage of goal values, basically turn green if they've met the nutrient requirement. So you'll see omega-6 and omega-3 is at a 13, and it's not green. That is because they prefer that to be under 5. So I always recommend that people do add like a fish or fish oil. And I'll show in a second snip, like a scenario of what happens to this number when you add fish and fish oil. And then you'll see that zinc is a little low. We're at 75%. There's virtually no iodine, and zinc to copper should be at a 9.5 ratio, but we're at a 5.1, and that is because of the low zinc. What's important to note here is the calcium to phosphorus ratio turned green, which is like one of the most important things. Can't say most important, but it's important when you're feeding raw. That's how PMR kind of came up with, well, if you feed 10% bone, you'll generally work out to this calcium to phosphorus ratio, which in this case, for what we've done, it did come out ideal. And then scrolling down more, you'll see that vitamin E and vitamin D3 did not come up as green, and those are lacking because, again, this is just the beef pack without taking into consideration adding a fish or a fish oil. I always tell people to add a fish or fish oil to these. Reason being is because meat isn't wild like it once was, so the omega-3 6 balance is off with all these farmed meats nowadays. So let's take a look at the same values that we looked at previously, but with the addition of fish. So of course, depending on fresh fish or fish oil, and then what kind of fresh fish, these are going to change, but just for the sake of this analysis, I've used herring because it's what we have in stock lately. And then I also have Bonnie and Clyde fish oil. We really like that brand, and we tend to use it when we don't have fish. So I've just done a combination of both. So you'll see it's accounting for 1.5 ounces of herring, which an average piece is like 1.5 to 2 ounces, and then 2 pumps of the Bonnie and Clyde fish oil. Keep in mind, this is for rush, so that's typically how much we would add for a 75-pound dog. So scrolling through these values, you'll see that everything up top pretty much remained the same. The iron went down, and one of the reasons that the iron went down is because this is a ratio of the entire formulation of the recipe. So these are related to the other values. It's basically saying X% of the total recipe. But it's down to 96%, which, as much as I know right now, I don't think 96% is anything concerning. I wouldn't call it a deficiency, but we do still have a lot to learn about these spreadsheets. Zinc went down from 75%, I think it was, to 72. And again, this is the relationship of the total. But what you will see down at the bottom is that we've corrected the omega-6 to omega-3. I know it doesn't come up green here. What I know as of today is that we want it under a 5, and that 1 is okay. Again, we're learning. I might change my mind about that if I read a couple things, but all I know is stay under 5. So 1 is under 5, this works for me. And then going down to the bottom, where we initially had vitamin E and D3 deficiencies, you'll see those have now turned green, and they have been corrected. So at the end of the day, as I said, and I've probably said 100 times in this video, we're still learning about all of this. Going through our beef pack and then comparing it to what happens when we add fish, I'm not jumping on Amazon and buying like 1,000 supplements right now for rush. I want to take it easy. I want to learn what there is to learn. I want to see how our other packs stack up to this AAFCO audit. So it's a work in progress, and I mean, it takes time. And again, there's always more to learn, and part of me is trying to part. I don't want to be closed-minded, and I don't want to be ignorant, so I'm not going to, be like, PMR is life, and we keep it simple, and that's how they eat in the wild. I do want to learn what's out there, and I want to learn so that I can make the best decision for Rush. Like, am I feeding him adequately? So this is just one of those steps. Again, a little bit of panic when we first saw these requirements and we're trying to wrap our heads around AAFCO and NRC, but taking one of the main packs that we sell as the raw and rush packs, so just the beef packs at the moment don't seem terribly awful. I would at this point probably recommend an iodine supplement. So this says that the requirement is about 239 micrograms. We have a supplement that we used for Raven because iodine is supposed to help with thyroid, and that stuff is like 800 micrograms per drop. So I've just been incorporating it into Rush's diet just by adding 1 drop like every 3 or 4 days. Again, who knows? I know that there's a lot to learn about the relationships between one nutrient and another. They affect each other's absorption. So that might not be the correct method to administer it. All I know is that I have to start considering ways, whole food or supplementation, to figure out how to get 239 micrograms of iodine into Rush's diet, because it looks like it's virtually extinct in meat products. From what I understand, it's like a very sea vegetable thing, so kelp and seaweed and spirulina, however you say it, you'll find iodine in those things. So that's one of the things we'll be researching. And again, we plan on trying to do this with all the other packs that we offer. We want to see how they stack up. And then I'm curious, as a long-term exercise, because I know a lot of you feed a combination of our packs, because we say, raw is, or PMR, 80-10-10, is balance over time, balance over time. So I want to take all of our packs and kind of play around with scenarios. Well, if I feed 3 beef packs and 2 pork packs and 2 chicken packs over the week, if I ever really reach AAFCO nutrient requirement balance. So yeah, stay tuned. This is gonna be quite a learning journey for all of us. But again, this is why we're here. We were here and we started here to help you guys understand the PMR ratio diet. Now that we're kind of dipping our feet into AAFCO requirements and NRC requirements and just kind of learning more, we want to keep everyone up to date on what's going on, because at the end of the day, it's your dog, it's your decision, but it's important that you know what's out there. So stay tuned.